How did you become involved in the beautification conservation effort?
Let me try to explore that. Shortly after the inauguration in January of '65, I knew I wanted to concentrate whatever I could do on whatever parts of Lyndon's program that made my heart sing, that came naturally, that belonged to me. And so I began to try to acquaint myself with all the facets of it. And all my life, nature, scenery, the beauties of this country had just been my joy, what fueled my spirit, made me happy. And Lyndon made a speech, and as I recall, it was at Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I think it was about February of '65, anyhow, early on into it. And it was a great deal of it was about the environment, about conservation, and I decided that's for me. And Stuart Udall, Secretary of the Interior, who was an expert salesman, came to see me, hoping to interest me in the field of conservation, for the national parks, for whatever. We were both exploring, and it was, to me, it was the right choice. So we began to form a committee, and we were going to work right there in our hometown, committee for a more beautiful national capital. Put on it people who had spent their lives in environmental efforts of some sort or another, like Lawrence Rockefeller and Mary Lasker, and then the heads of the Park Service, people who had a natural relation to that, and the city heads head of the City Planning Commission, and here I have to be imprecise about names. And we got underway, and we hoped it would have a ripple effect. And the early concept was that the way L'Enfant had laid out the city of Washington, with all those circles and triangles, where mostly there were at that time just maybe a dilapidated, fallen down bench and a few scraggy plants, that if we began to plant those beautifully and make them centers for people to sit and rest on a spring or summer day and contemplate our beautiful capital, that it would have a ripple effect not only in the pride of people in their capital city, but in their own whole town of Keokuk, Iowa, or Selma, Alabama, or wherever they might be. So we were just a bunch of pioneers sort of feeling our way. And let me say right here, the word beautification never really suited any of us, and we struggled to find something else, but not successfully. So we stayed with the word. Let me though quickly say, to me it was always just part of the whole broad tapestry of environment: clean air, clean water, free rivers, the preservation of scenic areas. It was just, it had its niche in the whole broad field, which became a consuming interest to me in the next 5 years, and will always be. I am hooked.
Was your role in to bring it onto a larger stage or a more national forum and magnify the importance of beautification?
Yes. You see, in a way, I think we were both riding a wave and trying to make that wave surge forward. I think the time had come in our national consciousness to look at the environment and question what man was doing to harm it, how we could harness those harmful things without doing, would still let free enterprise and industry serve the country, but preserve the environment while we were doing it. And I think it was, we watched hand in hand thought whose time was about to come. And I think that whatever service we performed was to walk this onto the national stage, put it on the national agenda, and yes, beautification, prissy word though it may be, became sort of the business of the politician, the businessman, the newspaper editor, and not just ladies over a cup of tea. We broadened the scope of it, I hope, I think, and made awareness of it. That was, because the more you read about it, the more concerned you became about the world you had known as a child and how rapidly it could slip through fingers and the next generation would not inherit it as beautiful and clean and full of flowers and open spaces as you remembered. So, in whatever ways I could touch that problem, I tried.
You mentioned Stuart Udall, but were there any particular writings or other individuals that influenced your thinking on conservation and the environment?
As for early writings, I just I grew up out in the country and read all the nature books that came my way. I cannot remember the names of writers now. I think Ernest Thompson Seton might have been one of them. And it was people and events and memories. And early on, Lawrence Rockefeller became one of those who influenced me, and I read about all the things his family had done, as wide a scope as the as Mesa Verde out in the far west, and the Blue Ridge Mountains, huge areas there, and just lots and lots of land along the Hudson River. Mary Lasker and her determination to have a flag of brilliant color on, was it Park Avenue, I think, in New York City, where she planted tulips and encouraged the owners of the property there to do the same. Yes, there was a spark that was struck in my heart with a lot of people. And then there were sights that I will never forget. For instance, one time Lyndon and I went out on a barge into one of the Great Lakes, I think it was Lake Erie. And the subject was the pollution of our lakes and rivers. And we had so much press as we could load onto this barge. It looked like it was about to tilt over into the water. And a huge bucket went over the edge, picked up a bucketful, swung it around onto this flat barge surface. We looked at it real close. It looked like a sort of a mixture of ink and glue. And all of that was waste that was being put into those waters. You can imagine that no fish could live in it, and no plant life either. And we just had to do something about cleaning up our world, or else we couldn't inhabit it either.
Somewhere I read that during your trips from Washington back home to Texas at the close of congressional sessions, the junkyards and billboards that...
Oh, that's quite true. And then in trips across the campaign trips, I was in love with the scenery of the United States and jealous of its spoliation, and although I'm certainly come from a line of people in business and all of us wanting a profit, I just thought there were better ways than to. I thought we could at least screen those junkyards with plantings or with some kind of fences, and at least limit the billboards. So we had to try.
How would you assess the accomplishments of the Johnson presidency in the field of beautification?
I would say principally in national awareness, creating a national awareness, and recognition that it was on the national agenda. And once more, let me say that beautification is just one thread in the whole warp and weave of the tapestry. And of course, there's the whole mass of legislation that was passed during those 5 years relating to the environment. Clean air, clean water, additions to the National Park Service, such as scenic rivers, national seashores like Padre Island, wilderness areas, new national parks. It was an explosion of legislation related to the environment.
What was left undone that should have been accomplished?
Years and years and decades for the next people in office to work on. The strengthening and operation of those bills, environmental protection all over the lot, from air, water, rivers, that we just began to attack, it seems to me, this vast national problem and made it part of the nation's agenda for goodness knows the rest of time.
Was there a national park that you would like to have seen that you didn't get?
Oh yes, I've been to a great many, but I've not been to Sequoia. One of the big things in my life was the Redwoods Park that was added, and that was in October of '68, right up to the wire. Lyndon was fighting for all these things, and Redwoods didn't get added until October of '68. And then there was another thing in that month that I wish I could describe accurately. I think it was the Land and Water Bill, which said that a part of the revenue from offshore drilling should go into a fund handled by the Department of Interior to purchase land for open space use, park use by some of it would be available to states and smaller entities, and a great deal of it in the National Park Service.
Should the provisions regulating billboards have been tougher, do you think?
We did the best we could. It is a vested interest. People make their living out of that. I don't know. I hope we tempered the spread of them, perhaps confined them to an area more close to the cities. Beautification, as it came about in our time in the White House, was one based on pride in your hometown, whether it was small town USA or wherever it was, a great city. For it to be clean with trees and flowers and places of refreshment for your spirit, and to get outdoors. For myself, it was the wellspring was the joy that nature had been to me in childhood and growing up years, and pride in the beauties of this country and all the regions of it, the distinct character and difference. And I hoped that each would recognize his own and keep some of the best of his own, be it Vermont, Alabama, or Texas.
You have a wonderful expression to the effect that beautification was only one facet of your whole drive for conservation. And I wish you would repeat that in the way that you... Just
but of course, beautification was only one little piece in the whole environmental picture. And incidentally, it's a word we never did like. We almost despaired of it. We just couldn't find the substitute. Clean rivers, clean air, the national parks, the expansion of them, and the inclusion of wilderness areas, and national seashores, and refuges for wetlands and birds. All of those were part of the net, part of the whole opening up picture. And we merely walked it onto the stage. A great deal of the first legislation was passed in our time. We took it out of the province of a few people, I think, particularly of women, garden club ladies, who thank God for those pioneers. But we made it, put it on the agenda for the politician and the businessman and just everybody who lived here. Now, the action on it, there'll be plenty left for decade after decade after decade.